And Mr. Toomey, welcome back to KDKA.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Just to make it clear, you are a Republican.
I am.
And a Republican won in Massachusetts. You got to like what you saw.
Well, absolutely. I was delighted to see Scott Brown pull off really a stunning victory. I think this is a continuation of a trend that we have been seeing for some time now. Remember, there were stunning Republican wins in Virginia for governor, New Jersey for governor, in Pennsylvania. Republicans won 6 out of 7 statewide judicial elections. And now we just won a Senate seat that Ted Kennedy and the Kennedy family has held for over 50 years. And I don't think it's because everybody has fallen madly in love with the Republican brand. I think it's mostly because they see a government out of control. Spending that is at a staggering and unsustainable level, way too much debt, an effort to take over health care, an agenda to push this country so far left that the American people they're just not on board with that agenda, and they're standing up and saying, let's put some brakes on this.
3 weeks ago, as you pointed out just before we went on the air, Scott Brown was trailing by 20 points in the polls. 3 weeks. Right. What made that difference? Because this tips the balance of power in the Senate.
That's right. It's a very big deal. And I'll tell you what happened is very straightforward. It was a very short race because it was a special election, as you know, so it was not the typical conventional election that you planned for many, many months. Nobody had heard of Scott Brown. Nobody in Massachusetts, except a tiny number of people in his state Senate district, had ever heard of him. And so he was unknown. He was way behind. And then he stood up and said, wait a minute. We got to get spending under control. We should stop bailing out failing companies. We don't need $1 trillion government takeover of health care, and we should spend money putting terrorists away, not paying for their lawyers. And the people around Massachusetts said, yeah, he's right. And we saw this stunning turnaround. So it's an impressive performance, but I think it just shows how out of step this very liberal government in Washington has become.
Senator Bob Casey says the message out of Massachusetts is that the Senate needs to go ahead and pass the stimulus plan that the House approved in December, another jobs bill. More spending,
like the first ones did much. Remember, we had a stimulus spending bill under President Bush in the final year of his term, and then they came along and spent $800 billion more. Remember, the president told us unemployment won't go above 8%. If we give him this spending bill. So they got their spending bill. Unemployment is 10% now, and I'm afraid it may even go higher. The idea that we can borrow and spend our way to prosperity is simply ridiculous, and I think most Pennsylvanians realize that.
Huge issue is health care reform. How will this change how that flushes out?
Well, they're simply not going to be able to pass this monstrosity that they've been working on. They just won't be able to do it. And it's not only that Scott Brown would provide a vote to block it in the Senate. Frankly, I think after what happened in Massachusetts, they probably don't have the votes among Democrats in the House anymore. So it's a question as to whether they want to give up altogether, or do they want to approach this with some modest common sense reform that guys like me and many others have advocated for a long time. Focus on affordability and access, help to lower costs. I've long argued that we should, for instance, give individuals the same tax deductibility when they buy health insurance that employers get. And we ought to allow people to buy insurance plans that originate in other states. That would force the insurance companies to really have to compete.
The heck with that. We just want the health care plan that they have for Congress.
Yeah, I want what they have.
Yeah.
That'd be fine. Yeah, I'd agree with that, too. They actually voted in Congress not to require members of Congress to be subject to whatever they pass.
I don't know how that's even possible.
Totally indefensible. Indefensible.
How is that possible?
Well, unfortunately, they can vote for whatever they want. They don't always abide by the Constitution and the principles they were sent for.
And that they crosses the aisle too. It's not just one party.
Yes, absolutely. It's a problem on both sides.
I think they'd get a health care reform done in a hurry if they had to live with whatever they decided was going to happen, them personally, for everybody else.
It couldn't hurt. I'd certainly think that it, as any measure of decency and common sense, whatever they pass ought to apply to themselves.
Pat Toomey, we appreciate your time. We will talk again for sure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Pat Toomey, a United States Senate hopeful here in the state of Pennsylvania.